Hello everybody, ciao a tutti, welcome to Art with Ms.B, and today is my video number 7. Well, in Italy we do like that, in the United States like that, actually it would be like this. Anyway, welcome back. So today we are going to focus on another couple of elements of art, right? And in particular, we're going to talk about shapes and also texture. So shapes, let's start with the shapes. So if you didn't watch my first 3 videos, I highly recommend you to start from the very beginning because I'm introducing element by element and I'm building basically the activities in order for you to understand better this element of art. So in the first 3 videos, we talk about lines and we did 3 beautiful projects using lines. Now, thanks to these lines, we can create shapes. It's like when we trace few lines and we enclose a space, when we create a silhouette of something, so we are creating shapes. Now, we have different type of shapes. We have geometrical shapes like triangles, rectangles, square, circle, rhombus, and more. And we have organic shapes, like let's say that I want to trace the length, like the silhouette of a cloud. That would be an organic shape. The silhouette of a tree, that would be an organic shape. The silhouette of a human body, that is an organic shape, right? Shapes are very important because every time that we create an artwork that that shows something specific, we are basically designing different type of shapes, geometrical or organic. And now let's switch to the texture. We're gonna also introduce a little bit texture because the texture is gonna be naturally part of this project. So I want you to understand before you arrive at the final project so you can analyze that project much better, right? So texture is basically the way that things feel under our touch. If you look around you, I invite you, wherever you are at home, probably following this video, just look around you and see different surfaces, different objects that you have, and touch them gently. So when you touch something, you can find that something, for example, I'm touching my table and it's smooth and hard. If I'm touching a piece of cardboard, I feel that it's a little rough, right? I touch my skin, I have a beautiful silky skin, and it's soft, right? Something could be spiky, something could be silky, smooth, rough, and more. So find out as many different type of texture as you can, looking around you and touch different surfaces, right? If you have a young kids or if you are like a parent who is helping with this video, their homeschool children, ask them, how does this feel? How does the other things feel? Let them express and describe what is their feeling that they are getting by touching different things. Now in art, we talk about 2 different type of textures. The texture that is real. So for example, let's say that we are doing a sculpture, we are building something with a clay, or we are building something with recycled material or with cardboard. When we touch this 3-dimensional form, basically we touch the real texture, right? We are touching the texture and the way that this material feels under our fingers. When we draw pictures and we color it on the paper, if we touch the paper, unless, and I will tell you, unless later, we usually feel one same smooth texture. But if we look at the picture and maybe it's a landscape and we see some rocky mountains and some water, we have the idea, like the optical illusion of a texture, and this is what we call implied texture. When you have an optical illusion, a fake texture, the artist represent using like a technique, for example, adding value that we will talk in the future, which is another extremely important element, light and dark basically, and maybe changing the type of the strokes that they use with the brush or with the pastels to give us this implied texture, this optical illusion of real texture. Okay, at the end of this project, however, we are going to experiment the real texture, and then later on we're going to keep building on shapes and texture for more complicated project. For today's project, what you will need is like a piece of very thick resistant paper, watercolor paper, mixed media, bristol paper, whatever you have available. We will need a pencil for drawing, we will need a scissor to cut, and a piece of cardboard. Any piece that you can find. We all have cardboards, like when we receive or your parents receive stuff from Amazon, You don't have to say the whole box, because I'm a very organized and I would not want my garage or whatever to become like a junk place, but maybe save part of it. It's very easy. You cut it and you keep them in a place. I love to recycle when I'm in school, because the budgets are always limited, right? So I am very creative and I love to use cardboards, because you can paint on cardboards, you can use pastels, you can use markers, you can cut it. Now, if you're very, very young students, like 5-6 years old, you might need help to cut the cardboard, because cutting cardboard is a little more challenging. So if you're a parent homeschooling or just practicing this project with your kids, make sure that you help them also, because you want to use just adult scissor, just because the children scissors are really too tiny and too light for cutting cardboards. However, if you do not have a cardboard for today, you can using 2 pieces of paper. One is going to be the foundations and the other one is going to be the ones that we are cutting shapes on. And remember that in the description box, I add the materials that I use, but that doesn't mean that you have to use the same. Use what you have available. For example, if I'm painting with watercolors and you don't have watercolors, so you don't like to use them watercolors, use colored pencil, use crayons, use markers, use what you have. Remember that the focus of this practice is about shapes, and today we're going to do geometrical shapes, and we're going to use them to create a design, and the texture at the end of the project. So you can pause the video, get yourself ready, and as soon as I switch the camera, you can play the video so we can practice together, which is something that I want to imagine that is happening, because it means that we have created these connections. Or you can watch the video, watch the project, speed it up, and then you do it at your own convenience, at your own pace, at your own time. You do not have to copy what I do. If you're a child, if you're a beginner, I highly encourage you to do what I do, just because it's easy for you to understand and for me to give you the feedback and the direction that you really need. If you are an intermediate, or if you are an adult and you want to give this practice a little twist, feel free to do so. You can increase the quality and the difficulty of the shapes, and you can create something really different. You can challenge yourself. So whatever you do, you have to do you, okay? So I'm gonna switch the camera and then we're gonna start this project together. Okay, guys, here we are. Now, just like a very quick review before we start in the project. This is just a piece of copy paper that I'm using to show you some notes. Like we say that there is a difference between geometrical lines and organic lines. So let's say that, for example, we are talking about geometrical shapes. Sorry, I wanted to say shapes and not line. Let me refocus this camera if I can make it work. And you see, this is like a square. Better, thank you. And a triangle on top. You see, we have 2 shapes and we create a house. So we can add the little rectangles, for example, and we use the shapes to create a design. Other geometrical shapes could be like, a diamond. And look, we can turn this into a beautiful, 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 beautiful kite. Now, later on, when we discuss realistic drawing, we notice and we know that, for example, when we have to do portraits, we use very dynamic lines and sort of geometrical shapes like ovals and stuff like that to, for example, build the structure of the face, the portraits, and then you start to add other details. Here you will make it like any face that you are trying to portrait to. Now, when we want to, I don't know, draw a body, for example, design a body, we have like the oval, then we have like a circle, then we create a sort of like a geometrical shapes. It's like when we are building a mannequin, right? So geometrical shapes are very, very important indeed. Not only because we can use them at the very beginning of our experience in art and of our practice, we can actually technically use geometrical shapes to build a design, but also because later on when we try, like we learn how to draw realistic humans, faces, stuff, so you will notice that you use the geometrical shapes to create the structures basically of whatever you want to draw. Okay, and then let's say that I want to do a cloud, for example. This is going to be more like an organic shape. You want to do a tree, you're going to build your tree, branches, dynamic lines. Remember when we did the first 3 exercises about lines, so we discussed about this. So If you didn't practice the first 3 videos, I really encourage you to do so, because you build your personal knowledge about lines, and today the practice is gonna make more sense to you. Okay, now finally let's switch to the practice. This is my thick nice piece of paper, and in order to do something that is a little smaller so it doesn't take too long and we can practice together, we're gonna just divide this paper in half. It's a little like tricky just because the paper is very heavy. Just make sure that the edges like kind of match, and then flat it down, and then with the scissor you can cut them apart. So we have a smaller surface. If you have already a smaller piece of paper, you don't have to cut. If you want to do a design that is big as your paper because you want to have more time and more fun, do so, please. Remember, you can follow my steps exactly as I do, but you can also like be creative and flexible about the practice. So now we are going to take our piece of recycled cardboard and we are going to keep it close to the paper, just because we have a specific size to fill. So we want to make sure that whatever we cut here is not too big, because otherwise it won't fit in the paper, but it's not too tiny, because then it won't fill the space properly, which, by the way, space is another element of art. So you see, every time that we do a project, we are building up and adding more elements. So this is gonna be my surface that we set aside, and here I know that you will find out pretty soon what my idea. You're going to use the pencil to trace geometrical shapes. If you want to use tools like rulers or like something that is rounded to trace a circle better, you can do it. I personally like for you to practice freehands. It is a good practice and they don't need to come out perfect. So I'm going to actually have 3 circles that I will need, and as you can see, they're decent, they're not perfect. Okay, then I'm going to actually I need a pretty big rectangle, and then I need another rectangle, actually something a little different. It starts like a rectangle, but then it opens up at the top. Then I probably need 2 small rectangles and a square. Now we're gonna cut. So I'm gonna make my piece of cardboard a little smaller, so it's gonna be easier for me to cut. As I always say to my students, double cut around the shape, not only because then you can use the rest without wasting, right? We can still use this piece for another practice, but also because it makes your cutting a little easier. Once again, if you are an adult practicing or a parent practicing with your kids, you probably have to cut the cardboard. If your piece of cardboard is small, for example, in school, I use a lot of cardboard. I have my first shape done. I use like with my students, I use cardboards. However, I know that, for example, when I'm teaching my 5 or 6 years old and 7 years old as well, I will be in charge of cutting. So I have them tracing the shapes that they need on the cardboard, and then patiently I will cut them. If I have older students assisting me, I will let them cut. If I have older students like 8 and more, like an older, they can cut by themselves because they can use these bigger scissors. Their hands are, big and strong enough to use those, and they can cut by themselves. I have my big rectangles, then I'm almost done. Once again, my friends, you can just do whatever I do, and I know that probably some of you have an idea what I'm cutting. Maybe some of you didn't find out yet, but you can also do you can create different shapes, and you can create any object that you want. I want to give you the little surprise at the end. I'm pretty sure that you start already to figure out this is the shapes that we already have. Now, the tricky part of cutting circles. And for example, you know what is the kind of cardboards that I really like? When I go sometimes and I buy shirts or pajama, right? And they come all folded, and inside there is this rectangle. of very thin but still good cardboard. I love to recycle those because they are good for painting. Mostly if you are like a beginner, you don't need to have a canvas all the time to paint. You can start actually to exercise your skill on cardboards. Cardboards is fantastic because it holds dry media, wet media, so recycle your cardboards because you can create a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful art project with it. And here we are, we have our shapes. Now, let me put my scissors away. Keep your station clean so you have all the leftover. You put them aside and then you will save them if you think that they can be reused, or you can actually throw them away. Now, look what I'm doing over here. I'm started to put together my shapes. And probably it's a very imaginary version of a train. Yes. So what does it mean? That now this background is going to become a background. Now, before you glue it, and to glue cardboard, you can use glue stick, or you can also use liquid glue, right? But don't glue it at the very beginning. Now, you try and you see the way that you want it in your space, okay? And we're going to remove this so you have space available for you, and we're going to create a background. Now, where do you want your train to go? I think that today I'm thinking about a little countryside. So remember, we did this, an introduction of landscape, when we did the third video about the lines. I'm tracing my line of the horizon. I'm gonna do something like nice. I don't want mountains, but I mostly want hills. I want to have something like the sky. Remember, you can have a sun. You can have, if you want a sun, you can just do like a circle, no ray, or you can paint it directly if you're using watercolors, okay? Otherwise, if you're using markers, pencil, crayons, just trace the circle for your sun, and then you know where to color with the yellow and what color to use for the sky. I want to have like something, let's say that my train is gonna be mostly here, so I want to see like I don't know, some trees. Yes. Now if I put them here in the middle ground, remember what we say, things are started to be pretty far away, right? So you don't have to add too many details, definitely not all the details of the leaves, because it's an optical illusion. So we're gonna paint or color them to give the idea of the texture of the leaves, but we cannot technically see every single leaves, right? If the tree was here, of course it would be much bigger because this is the foreground, so it's something that is close to us. Then I want to have like a nice little road, country. There we go. I want to have probably some more trees over here that will be even smaller because they are really, really, really far away. I'm gonna have like a kind of trees over here. Very peaceful, quite like images of the countryside. Now I'm thinking about a countryside in Italy just because I'm about to leave for 3 fantastic weeks in Italy and I can't wait and I'm very excited. So now, you know, I am kind of very nostalgic of my country, and I tend to kind of paint it and draw it and refer to it every time that I have a chance. Another little road. Here I don't need to add that much because remember, my train is going to probably cover, right, the majority of this landscape. So I wanted to make sure that I do have something nice all around and behind the train. And of course, this doesn't make real sense, right? The train is a little big compared to the background. But once again, friends, this is just a nice project and a nice practice so we can practice geometrical shapes, learn how different shapes create something, in this case, a train, and then how to incorporate this object into a landscape. Now, I decided to go with watercolors to paint just because I'm going to do a little faster, but if you want to do with colored pencil, crayons, whatever you have available, markers, do so. I'm going to put this tray aside, and maybe I will start from painting the sky, and I want a nice blue sky. We can also have some music just to help us to relax a little bit. And now you do you, and we started to color. Remember that in video 4, 5, and 6, we review colors together, right? So now you know what are the warm colors, what are the cold colors, what colors do you like, do you think that interact very well next to each other? What are the complementary colors? Because we reviewed together the color wheel and we did exercises about. So maybe you can open the folder that you are creating with me, and you can look at the color wheels and you can keep it next to you. So it's going to help you to make a good decision about colors, right? Remember, friends, that when we do a practice, the practice is meant to build foundation and knowledge. So do not abandon the practice. Don't lose that paper. Build a portfolio, which means put together all the projects, because you are building knowledge. So when we work on skills and on knowledge, we should never forget what we learned before. We should kind of build. And if you are a teacher looking at this video, looking for idea of how to explain, remember that in every exercise, review with your students all the elements that are included. Specify, of course, where the focus should be, but make sure that you refer to what was like all the previous practices, because it just makes more sense for the student. Is a good way for a quick review and for making sure that we are not substituting like the knowledge, but we are building it up. So nothing is forgotten. Definitely, I'm going to do some of my trees now. And it's also like, so relaxing, the fact that we get to spend these 30-40 minutes together creating art. Just think about nothing else than what we are doing and what we have been learning together today, which is like a very simple, nice practice that you can do to review the element of shapes and introduce the element of texture. When we practice about the elements, we don't need to do complicated project, because otherwise the focus will be basically switched and you will be so stressed and anxious about the technique itself, like, oh my, it is so difficult, or this didn't came out, you will focus on something that we don't need to focus right now. So as also teacher or as a parent who's homeschooling, so basically you are playing the role of a teacher, I suggest you don't do at the very beginning too complicated practice and don't add too much. Now in this practice we have kind of two steps, right? Shapes, geometrical shapes, design them, cut them, and create something with it. And now we are building the background. In this background we can review or we can approach the rules of painting a landscape, right? The foreground, middle ground, background, the line of the horizon, and etc. But don't focus too much on this one. Let your kids have fun and create any background that they feel like, because the focus at the end of the project will be on the shapes and the real texture that they will feel. As you can see, I'm mixing a very light green to the dark green. This is an anticipation of another element, which is the value, when we add the light and dark tones to make our drawing more interesting, more natural, more dynamic, if you want, right? To create that idea and that illusion of an implied texture, and the fact that the light is sitting this way. So probably this side is closer to the sun, is going to be a little lighter compared to this one, right? And my friends, I'm using like a realistic color to color the trees, like brown and tree. But if you want your trees to be yellow and orange because you're thinking about the fall, go for it. There are really no restrictions right now. Remember that we are not focusing on how to paint a real landscape, but we are focusing about having fun and creating a background for the shapes. There are two different exercises and two different practice. There we go. I'm not really wasting too much time now on, making it look perfect. I'm just like relaxing and feel the space with paint. And you can do, hopefully you will do the same. And relax and see how the different colors interact with each other, how that this little landscape. I'm so curious if you want to do, I don't know, maybe some of you did a seascape when you have the sea or lake or something, or maybe a desert, right? If you're with me, like in Utah, we have so many gorgeous different landscape that we can get inspired by. And we live in a high desert, so we have everything, I want to say, except for the sea. We are so blessed, right? With such a gorgeous nature. You can do the arches, the canyons, the mountains. We have so many things here. My only advice is just to make your piece more interesting, that don't use only one color, right? So when we do the hills, let's say I do all green. Well, let's do dark green, light green, some brown. Be creative. If you have a sunset, for example, these colors will look more like an indigo, some violet. If you look and observe the mountains during like in sunset, like during the golden hour, you will notice that actually you cannot really see the real colors, but mostly on the top they look more like a purplish bluish color. Very, very cool. So experiment, make choices about the colors. If you feel that you want to learn and you want to copy what I'm doing, try, but don't feel that you have to use exactly the same colors and the same tones that I'm using. And you see, creating spot of darker colors is cool because it's going to help us to build some implied texture, which is something that we introduced during the instructions for this project. So it's an idea, an optical illusion of texture, right? You can also change the direction of the strokes if you're painting with me to create that optical illusion of having like some grass, some like, you know, different texture. And dedicate time and attention to this project, just because, as I always say to my students in school, it is important to finish before we start. It is important to give love to something, right? And give attention in this life when the rhythm is so fast, and the kids, you know, you kids are, you know, have a very difficult, honestly, life, because you're always like a little pressure to do many things, and you don't really have the time sometimes to stay and enjoy a project. Well, art, it's a fantastic practice to teach us and help us to dedicate time and attention and care to something that requires a longer time to be done and finished. Something like the now is almost a luxury, a privilege, when it shouldn't be. We should always have the time to dedicate care, love, and attention to something and someone. So let's take this advantage now that we are practicing all together. And don't think about anything that you were doing before and anything that you have to do after. Just to stay with me in this landscape, or any landscape that you created for your train or your shapes, and just enjoy. There we go. I'm gonna use a bigger brush so we can go a little like faster on the foreground. Although I really wish we have forever, you know, I love and I relax myself so much in painting that I wish it could last forever. So please do not rush. You can always pause the video or watch it like at a speeding it up and then practice at your own convenience, but don't rush the practice. Take time while you practice to ask yourself some questions. What do I remember about the colors that we learned together in video number 1, 2, and 3? What type of palettes I'm deciding to use, like a warm, a cold, a mix of both. If you're using watercolors, remember that we used them when we did the color wheels together, and you know, you need to find out what is the right amount of water for you. Not too much, not too little. And you know, it's so cool the fact that you need to kind of practice in order to be able to see what really works better for you. Once again, you can kind of change the direction from flat to the side, and then do some um, illusion, of course, of grass, leaves of grass, that will give us the optical illusion of a different texture. Don't worry about this, like the implied texture, so the fake texture, because we are going to do one more practice at least about it. I'm not gonna add too much over here because this is where my train will be, so it's kind of, you know, useless just because it will be covered. little bit here. Actually, I have this idea that I want to have the touch of blue. Sometimes I like to use the same color, like to somewhere to put like the color of the sky, like bring the sky down on earth. And maybe could be some puddles, some, you know, here where I live, I have a beautiful natural reservation, and we have this river, the canal, the lake. So definitely is a big inspiration for me because I kind of include it in different projects. Be inspired by some of your best memory of traveling, um, or just the landscape that surrounds you. Now I'm gonna do like a very, very, very yellow sun. And for my beginner, if you're painting and you're using maybe just by accident a little too much water and the color, it doesn't matter. Do not get upset, because actually is exactly how we do learn. So you should feel happy and excited about the little accident, because that thanks to the little accident is that you learn, right? There we go. And now just for the final touch, just in case you want to add a few flowers, just use a little bit of water, and maybe you can just do tiny little dots, because remember, the things that are here in the middle ground are pretty far away, right? So it is really, we cannot really see every single petals, right? So the flowers is just, once again, an optical illusion. So you do tiny, tiny, tiny little dots. If you feel like that you don't want to use a brush for this, but you have, for example, the paper is dry already, you can use a marker, do so, to facilitate a little bit of practice. If you're more an intermediate or an advanced artist or an older artist, like, just try to do it with the brush. Tiny, tiny, tiny little dots. Spread them around naturally, because, flowers, they grow spontaneously. So we give a little touch of colors here and there with this beautiful, like, bright red. To make our landscape a little more interesting, fun. Maybe a little bit of pink. To create some nice illusion of clouds with a little bit of pink. Maybe I'm gonna go and occupy a little bit of sun. And when you think that you are satisfied and you're done, you're gonna let it dry. Now, for the purpose of the video, because we cannot wait forever, once it is dry, you're gonna apply the glue sticks. If you have liquid glue, mostly if you're a child, do not put too much. The cardboards will attach very easily on the paper, right? And now you kind of build up together, you put it together, maybe here, you place it in a spot where you're kind of happy. You're gonna touch like the windows over here, the three wheels. If you create a different shapes, you can create a different shapes, and this is gonna be your train. You will glue it down, and then you're going to decorate it. So you want to have fun, you can leave it in a cardboard like this, a neutral cardboard, but you can actually decorate it. What is beautiful about cardboard is that you can paint it on top, but you can also use a dry media like markers, and in that case it will make like for example, with the black you can kind of add the details to your train. I need to move the paper over here and place it here. Actually, it's even easier that if you decorate before, you can paint and add the details on top, but you can create a colorful pattern. Remember in video number 1, 2, and 3, we talk about lines and we construct like a pattern. This is gonna be my window. These are gonna be the details of the wheel, so you can make it really, really nice and fun. So actually, let's review the steps. Once this one is all like painted, you let it dry, and actually using markers, so you don't have to wait again to let everything dry. You're going to add all the details that you want on your train. If you created something different, for example, you created the shape of a boat, you can color the details on your boat, and then once everything is dry, you will put the glue behind the shapes and you will glue the shapes onto the surface. Let's add a nice touch of that. And you know now that I love lines and patterns. I'm obsessed with them. So of course, I'm gonna use some of these to decorate my cardboard train. Nice. And now I'm gonna use a little bit of blue. Of course, the colors won't show exactly the same way that they look like, because the cardboard has, you know, these brownish colors. But it's also beautiful because you're gonna use a color and you're going to be surprised about the way that the color will look like on a piece of cardboard. This is so good practice. Actually, here I want to have a little yellow that will never show as a yellow, but it will give us the idea. And let me tell you, cardboard is fantastic, friends. It's really, really, really fantastic, because you see, markers work very well. If you want to paint, if you have crayons, everything really works on cardboard. So my 3 wheels are ready. Where do I want to put these windows? Here, probably. Oh, yes. Let's put it here. And I want to make it look like a house train. As you see, am I doing a realistic train? Absolutely not. Am I having fun adding and adding details? Absolutely yes. This is what I want you to do. See? One. Turn it. 2. And now something here. I want to use very hot colors. When you color, try to make sure that you fill all the gaps. You can do small, short, and fast strokes, or you can do like longer, slower, kind of tracing line next to each other, as we learned when we did other project, the second video, if I recall it correctly, about two different techniques, pencil and markers. So this is why you see, once again, I always refer to our previous practices. So this is why it is important to start from the beginning. Even if you will like an element more than another, even if you will like a practice more than another, when we are learning, we need to do what is necessary to build a good knowledge, a strong foundations, right? And finally, I'm going to add some fun lines. There we go. Now we clean up the markers. Remember, it is important to keep our stations nice and clean. And here we have the background that we created. If you did a countryside landscape, this is more or less what you will have. If you created a different type of background, it's totally fine. And in the background, we kind of put together our train. You will put the glue, never put the glue on the paper, always put the glue behind the little shape that you are gluing down, and then you will press it down very, very well, and you will put it under pressure. Look how beautiful is this. Let me move this. There you go. Look how beautiful is this. So now we learn with today practice that we can use lines to trace a different type of shapes. This case we use geometrical shapes. We put the shapes together to create a design, something, in this case a train, and then we use the paper to create the background, right? Something for our train to be on top. When you touch this surface after it's all dry and glue, you will feel texture. The paper is gonna feel smooth, right? And the cardboard is gonna feel rough. Also, the cardboard has a thickness, as you can see, right? That the paper doesn't have, and you will feel this thickness. So we create a real texture. We create an implied texture, which is the optical illusion of grass, flowers, tree, right? Or liquid like the water, and we create a real texture with the train. Now, we are going to turn the camera back so we can say a proper goodbye, and I can give you some reminder and recommendation. I really, really like this tiny little project, and it was so fun and so relaxing to do it together. Okay, friends, the practice it's all done, and just as a reminder, so we understand what we just did together, right? We were focusing on the two elements of shapes and texture. We use lines, which we know now very well because of the previous practice, to trace geometrical shapes. We trace these shapes on a piece of recycled cardboard. So we cut those shapes and we play like we create something like a train, and then we place it aside. Then we decide what type of background do I want for my train. Do I want the train to pass by a countryside like I decided to do because I was thinking about Italy? Or do we want to have a seascape? You want to have a lake? Whatever you wanted, it is okay. I guided you in this activity, and we reviewed together a few simple rules that you can always use when you're drawing and doing a landscape. The line of the horizon, which divides the top and the bottom of the paper, so you know where to place other details, right? We discussed about the foreground, which is the bottom side of the paper where things are closer to us, so bigger. Middle ground, they are far apart, and in the background, they're really, really far. I painted some bushes, some trees, a beautiful sun, some cloud in the sky, and I use watercolors. If you do not have watercolors, but you still want to practice today, you can color your landscape with any media, any supplies that you have available. Crayons, you can mix them and do some nice shading, colored pencil, and markers, right? With the markers, you cannot really shade and mix, so probably I encourage you to use a pencil or crayons. And we kind of introduce the value, because you saw me using a lighter and darker tones of the same color, like light green and dark green, just because we want to give that optical illusion that the lights hit the surface from a directions. At the end, we had fun with markers, coloring the shapes, so the train that we created on the cardboard. You can color it and add details and patterns, and then remember, once the landscape is dry, if you use painting, you're gonna put the glue on the back of each shape. You can use glue stick or you can use liquid glue. If you use liquid glue, please do not use too much, because it's basically cardboard on paper, so it's very easy to attach. Just a little drop in the back, and then you place the shape where you want it and you press it down. After you finish, you can actually gently touch with your hand on top and feel the different texture between the paper and the cardboard, so you have a real type of texture. Now, in the following video, we're gonna still investigate the texture, and maybe we focus more on an implied texture, or something that many painters, like from the past, use it to create this optical illusion. I really enjoy this practice. As I always say, you can pause the video as many times as you want. You can practice with me as I wish and I hope. You can speed up the video, watch it all, and then practice at your own convenience, right? Please remember to like the video, to subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions, leave the question in the comment. I will do my best to answer. One last reminder, do we throw away the project or do we lose it? Absolutely not, right? So place it in your folder with the other project that we created, because we are building a beautiful portfolio. Now I wish you all a fantastic day, and I hope to see you soon with more practices together. Ciao!